We're going to start a new series today that God is wanting to use us. I think it's a fair statement to say everyone wants to make a difference in this world. I mean, I don't think anyone grows up and dreaming of, waking up, going to work, you go home, you watch Netflix, you scroll through social media, you fall asleep in the recliner, and you do it all over again the next day. If y'all couldn't tell, that's pretty much described our lives. We don't want to spend our lives being time wasters or space takers or binge watchers. We want to make a difference. But it's so easy to get caught up in the everyday stuff of life until, the years just slowly kind of go by and the question seems to get louder. Am I making a difference in this world? Now we know that most people measure the difference a person makes by how many or how much. How many friends, how many followers, how many likes, how many comments do they get on social media? The phrase is, are you an influencer? Or how much money and power someone has is often how we gauge a person's impact. But without a doubt, Jesus was the person who made the biggest impact in all of history. And yet it's surprising because he didn't follow anything like the formula society gives us today. Jesus grows up in a poor family. He worked as a carpenter for most of his life. He didn't have thousands of Facebook followers or Instagram followers. He wasn't TikTok famous. He didn't have a YouTube channel. And, he never tweeted or podcast. But how did Jesus make a difference in this world? Now, I know there are a number of answers that we could highlight from that, but there's one in particular, and it's really what this entire series is going to be about. How Jesus really impacted people and how he made a difference. And it's this: one at a time. One at a time. We're not here in Sudan by accident. God's placed us here on purpose and for a purpose. We know that. And wherever God has placed us is a space in which he wants to use us. Now, making a difference isn't measured by, viral posts or if we get a name on a building. It isn't determined by following or a fan base. Making a difference isn't dependent on what's in our bank account or, how many phone contacts we might have. Want to make a difference? Focus on the one. And I think that was the way of Jesus. We're going to look at that today. We're going to see, I think Jesus kind of did life with a zoom lens. Because when someone stood in front of him, it was as if time stopped. Everything else in all of his life, concerns, agenda, plans, goals, that they seemed to blur. And Jesus ministered with equal compassion, whether it was the community leader or the riffraff of town. The rich or poor, the sick, the healthy, the Jew, the Gentile. It didn't matter. The only person that mattered was the person that was standing in front of him. Jesus changed the world one person at a time. Now, if you're still there in Luke 8, that Larry read for us, if you're not turned there. And those verses he read for us, in verse 40, we see Jesus has in front of him a crowd. And there's expectations. It says they had been waiting on him. And then verses 41 and 42, the father desperately needed help for his daughter. And no doubt, but by this point, the father had probably called everyone he could think of to help his daughter. But we know that he was getting no help. And it's easy to read these verses about this distraught father and forget about the crowds. I mean, what happened to the crowds? Because they're still there. Jesus was still surrounded by people, but when Jairus stepped in front of him, he became the sole focus of that story. Because Jesus' zoom lens was focused only on the one. So we know this story. Jesus agrees to go with Jairus, but then we read that the crowds, and it's in verse 42, it says, almost crushed him. They were pressing against him, I think as one version says. So we're back to so many people with all these expectations. But then Luke tells us this. Look in verse 43 and 45. We know about this interruption. And a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years could not be healed by anyone, came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. And immediately her hemorrhage stopped. And Jesus said, "Who's the one who touched me?" And while they were all denying it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd, the people, they're pressing in on you." So with such big crowds, how could he possibly focus on just the one? Because Jesus says in verse 46, you know what? Someone touched me. Verse 47. When the woman saw that she had not escaped notice, she came trembling. She fell down before him, declared in the presence of all the people the reason why she had touched him. And now she had immediately been healed. In a crowd where there is one who must not go unnoticed, here's the question for us. Do we notice them? Do we notice that one? Because the Lord is calling us to make sure that no one goes unnoticed. I mean, let me give you a few examples. It's amazing when you start reading through about this. Luke 19, 1 through 10, Jesus goes into Jericho. The people are packing the sides of the street to try to get a glimpse of Jesus. So there's this little guy who has to climb a sycamore tree, right? But where is Jesus' focus? On the one. Matthew 8, first 4 verses. It says Jesus comes down from the mountain, or mountaintop, and verse 1 says this, there's large crowds following him. But then a leper shows up. And Jesus zooms in on the leper. And it's like everyone else is cropped out of the story. Mark 7, 31 through 35. The people bring to Jesus a deaf man. And in verse 33 it says this, and Jesus took him aside from the multitude by himself. One more, John 5, 1 through 9. It's the pool of Bethsaida. Jesus goes to a place where, remember, it says there's a number of disabled people who are lying there. Lots of sick people. But we read that one gets all of Jesus' attention. And he's the recipient of the miracle. Now, why doesn't Jesus heal all of them there? I don't have an answer for that. But here's what I do know. The more you read the Gospels, the more you see that one is the way of Jesus. Jesus did life with a zoom lens. When someone stood in front of him, it's as if time stopped. And everything else in life, all of Jesus' concerns, agenda, and goals, that they were blurred, at least for the moment. And he was fully present with that one. How many of you, I need to ask the question here, and I'll go ahead and tell the story anyway, but how many of you have seen the Spot the Gorilla video? Anybody? Y'all need to get out more. All right, some of you have, but let me tell you this Spot the Gorilla video. There's 6 people, and they're standing in a circle. 3 are in white shirts, 3 in black. Y'all can go Google this afterwards. Not now. And 2 hold basketballs. So you're asked to watch this 1-minute video and keep track of how many times the basketball is passed by the people in the white shirts. So the 6 people, they start moving about and passing the balls, and in the middle of this video, a gorilla walks into the crowd of 6 people. He faces the camera, he thumps his chest, then he steps off the screen. And the gorilla is in this 1-minute video for 9 seconds. Okay? Here's the question. Would you see the gorilla? And of course, we'd say yes, we would. I mean, how in the world could you miss a gorilla, right? Wrong. When they did this experiment at Harvard, half the people, didn't see the gorilla. And we're thinking, how in the world could they miss the gorilla? But I think it's simple. It wasn't what they were looking for. They had an agenda to watch the people in the white shirts and count how many times they passed the basketball. So they were preoccupied with the crowd, and they focused on what the crowd was doing. So what do we see? In our home, at our work, in our neighborhood, I don't know, at the co-op, Allsup's. Most people walk around today with their heads down, buried in their phone, don't they? They don't see anything. But here's the thing. We probably see what we're looking for and what we trained our eyes to look for. I bet we'd probably be stunned at what we don't see. So what did Jesus see? At least 40 times in the Gospels, we read this just 2 words, Jesus saw. So if we want to have the results that Jesus had, we need to do what he did. And it begins by seeing what he saw. And he saw people. Back to the story here in Luke 8, if you look in verse 48, remember it says, and he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." In a society where men didn't talk to women they didn't know, husbands didn't talk to their wives in public. That was just their society. Jesus spoke to her with a word of affection. He called her daughter. Now imagine being this woman. It says she's been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She spent all of her money trying to come up with the cure. And the religious laws of the time stated that her illness made her unclean. So she had been ostracized from the community. And for 12 years, here she is living this nightmare. And almost everybody would have regarded the woman in the crowd as, you know what, unimportant. She didn't matter. But for Jesus, she was someone. So his focus changed from the crowd, even for Jairus' daughter for a minute, right, to care for the one. You know, there's a quote that says this: God loves each of us as if we were the only one in the world. Everyone expected the unclean woman to contaminate Jesus because that's just how things worked back then. But this time something different happened. Jesus purifies the woman. He gives her a new life, hugs and touch of a family that she hadn't had in years. And Jesus saw the one woman in the crowd who had a need. Let me close with this. You know, do we want to make an impact with our lives? And now society is going to tell us go big. I'm going to tell us just the opposite this morning. Go small. Try focusing our attention on the one. On the one that God places in our paths that we can make a difference. Have compassion on that one person. You know, one daughter at a time, one son at a time. Do we really want to love people and make a difference in this world? And so maybe we need to begin praying to Lord, give me your eyes. Help me see this world through your eyes. Help me see the people you want me to see, one at a time. God does want to use us to change the world. There's no doubt about that. And we can't do everything for everyone. But you know what? We can do something for the one. The one. So let's keep asking ourselves, and we'll talk more about this next week, am I making a difference one at a time? Drew, come lead us in